Kyle Barnfield with me today, who's going to demo some of the new Slipstream UI5 presentation layer that we can show. So that's us. Enough about us. This is kind of what we do, which you'd expect. So we focus on digital user experience and core. So I won't go through these slides as such. The digital practice is where we come up with kind of new innovation areas. So Maextro's kind of been on our whiteboards for a while, a number of years. And as I said, we released it kind of 18 months ago. It's evolved massively, and there are other new innovations coming out of this practice that we have here at our church offices. These are some of the people that we're working with at the moment. So let's talk data governance. So obviously two kind of drivers around data governance, one being IT, and how we would normally explain it. IT is kind of that facilitator or the vehicle of where information flows, and obviously from a data governance point of view, the data is kind of the passenger. So this whole governance aspect, this is the thing that's kind of directing and conducting your decisions around your enterprise data, really. You know, where it's used, how it's used. So all these kind of facets within the diagram on the left-hand side is what we're trying to knit together. And ultimately, your data governance, the objectives should be around accuracy, completeness of data. You know, who can see what, where. That kind of pictures, you know, what a data governance strategy might look like and what the facets that should be included. So different businesses, obviously, they operate differently. Some may require, you know, an owner of all data, so like a chief data officer. Other businesses, dependent on how they operate, they might have what you'd consider data owners per area or operational area. The point is, whether you're large enterprise or small enterprise, you need to start thinking about these types of organizational changes. You shouldn't be a large company to be concerned about data quality. That's the point, really. So, you know, our takeaway today, and we're going to go into the technology itself, but areas to start thinking about. Education is a key. You know, everybody thinks of data as a kind of, it's a technical task, and it isn't really, because it affects everything that you do in business. So it's key. So that whole education of why data is important and how it can impact. Another important point is, how do you measure your quality of data, and not just quality as well, not just quality of data, but, you know, your footprint of data. So for those of you guys that are thinking at some point of moving to S4HANA in the future, one of the key things in there is going to be data migration, data footprint. The data footprint is going to dictate your cost, your runtime of your kind of infrastructure, whether it's cloud or on-premise, it's still going to have an impact. So that whole measurement's really important. And the other things is obviously, you know, do you have governance in place now, whether it's paper-based, whether you've kind of got offline forms, whether it's, you know, decentralized process. Do you have governance in place, and do you have business rules? So do you know the rules that need to be applied to your data? Now, a lot of the time during projects, we don't really see anything kind of written down in terms of, these are our business rules for a material master, or these are our business rules for a bill of material or a customer or a vendor. They're either in people's heads, or they're kind of residing in different systems. So what we're kind of saying is, you need to start thinking about that. And obviously, for all this to kind of work, you need the technology in place. So those kind of key areas start to galvanize a roadmap to establish what we would say a governance kind of program. And that little line at the bottom there, you know, by governance, we don't mean having lots of approval steps for the sake of it and making people's jobs harder. You know, it's all about, Maextro is all about governance, but at the same time, simplification of processes, which we'll show you in a second. So in terms of an overall data lifecycle management project, this would be SAP's take on it. Okay, so the bottom area here are the technologies that are available, some of which very costly, very complex to implement, and again, you need kind of very niche skill to deliver some of this. So understanding data is one area. Integrating data or migrating of data is pretty important. Reviewing that data, making sure it's clean and usable, and then managing that data through your, whether it's supply chain or financial supply chain or other areas within manufacturing. Associating data is quite important, whether it's attachments or, again, other systems. And lastly, end of life of data, so kind of archiving that data. So this is all really kind of important stuff. These are the solutions that SAP offer. Now, what we're doing is kind of a little bit of everything, but we're focusing quite heavily on these areas here. So the reviewing, the cleanse, the runtime, the managing of data, the association of data, and archiving. Obviously, the understanding is really important, and we provide analytics and consultancy services. And integration, every business is different. So again, with integration, whether it's interfacing or migrating data, everybody's got different requirements. But our kind of core product covers all of these areas, but we're predominantly focusing on from review and cleanse onwards. I won't talk through this. This slide pack will go out. Hopefully, it'll just help you guys understand what a data lifecycle management project might look like and how maybe Maextro can help your organization. In terms of an approach and where people start, again, like I said, there's a lot of pre-work that you can do around understanding business rules, governance, processes, education of why data is important. But across these different areas, the typical kind of life cycle, people might start trying to understand their data first. Then they might try and review and cleanse that data once they've run the reports. And then they'd have ongoing management of that data, and then obviously integrating it and associating it, and maybe using some document management systems as well, and then finally archive. So that would be a typical sequence of events. However, we do things slightly different because over time we've realized that this is pretty important. So by actually establishing your business rules, your processes, and your kind of governance steps, by starting managing BAU, so new requests, change of data, extension of data objects, what you actually start doing is you actually start cleansing data at the same time. And what we're trying to do here is fix a lot of the problems at source in runtime. Okay, so we would typically start managing data. Obviously, as part of management of the data, you want to understand what's going on and you want to compare what's going on versus some of my legacy data, and therefore trigger a kind of a cleanse, which, that could be considered like a maintenance activity. I'm not so much talking about migration of data from a legacy application. I'm talking about cleaning legacy data residing in SAP. And from there, as I said, we've got our eyes on people wanting to move to S4. So we feel the archive, lowering that footprint, cleaning up data that's irrelevant to a user should be kind of removed, certainly from drop downs and table entries within SAP. And then finally, associating data. The integration piece, the migration, that's kind of an exception to the rule. It might happen often if you're going through merger and acquisition or SAP projects, but we wouldn't consider it part of BAU. Yeah, it's kind of one-off activities, but again, we're catering for that. So just to put things into picture, this is where a lot of people start, to be honest. Okay, so they're using different systems, a lot of Excel maybe. For those of you that have a kind of MDM solution in place today, well done. But a lot of people are kind of following this step. And what we've done, whether it's ECC6 or S4, Maextro will start running some of this stuff. So we introduce best practice around process management of data and therefore cleansing the data. It'll cover every object from HR, manufacturing, supply chain, whatever it is, whatever object it is, Maextro can deal with it. And obviously, because we're giving you the technology and the processes it's inbuilt with its kind of governance and kind of audit capability. Now, where we see the kind of value for those of you that are on ECC 6 is you can kind of start harmonizing, getting that data ready for that journey to S4. As I said, it is going to have quite a big impact when you come to move, if you've got your data sorted out and you're lowering your total cost of ownership. So that's kind of the journey. Maextro is compatible across both systems. This is just to put things into context. Why adopt a data strategy and what am I going to get from a solution like Maextro? So yeah, Maextro. The Maextro is all about conducting that data. So that whole governance step will cover all master data objects in SAP. We can hold all sorts of things like non-SAP values within Maextro as well. It's got its own inbuilt workflow, own forms. So you can start removing forms that are existing outside of SAP and kind of bring them in together. The important bits which we're going to focus on today is this concept of kind of business rules and governance as well. And what Ferris is going to show you is our configuration menu. So it focuses again on configuration as opposed to ABAP programming or UI5 programming. And that's probably a big differentiator for Maextro. So if you guys adopt Maextro, you can configure the solution yourself. You do not need the different resources that you typically need in an SAP MDM project. You'd need business rule framework, ABAP, PI consultants, MDG consultants, whereas this is a lot more linear, a lot more simple, because we put a lot of effort into that whole user experience. And this is how it kind of works. And this is the same for cleansing data or running BAU tasks. So whether a person is asking for a new customer or a new vendor, they would typically create a request within Maextro. Now, depending on the process that's been adopted within the organization, there might immediately be an approval step. It's optional, but again, we kind of build that in as best practice. So somebody will create a request, somebody will approve that request, and then it might trigger a series of data gathering tasks across the organization. So some bits might go to finance, some might go to purchasing. Now that's called a distributed model. Your model might be a lot more simple, where it's just one person or one team that gathers that data. Once the data is gathered, it comes in for approval and obviously updates SAP. And this process of create request, approve, data gather, final approve is consistent throughout Maextro because it's deemed best practice. And obviously there's a lot of detail in these stages, things like duplicate checks and all that type of stuff. But it's there, and it's based on a process, and that's the kind of important thing. Maextro is not just about data; it's about your business processes, and that's really important. I'm going to hand over in a second to Ferrell's, but just these are some of the features. I'm not going to talk through all of them. It's got different UIs available, but it's all sitting on the same stack of technology. Some of the feedback that we've had around, from audit people is the fact that everything's in one place, and you've got, accountability with a name and a date and time stamp against all sorts of things like approvals, data gathering aspects. The workflow is really easy. We'll show you some of that stuff as well. I won't go into configuration. I've explained that. An important point is the Office integration. So we've got integration with Excel, so mass processing. We've got email alerts that can be triggered from Maextro, and we can also put calendar entries into people's calendars so that they action certain tasks throughout the day as well. So Maextro, as I said, is quite focused on processes and SLAs. So how long did it take me to create that data object versus what was my planned or my estimated dates. So that's really useful in terms of being able to report things. User interfaces, yeah, we'll come on to this. We're going to show you a little bit of this stuff. So we'll touch on mobility, but this is the thing that we're going to show you shortly. So screen personas has come a long way. It's free technology. As I said, there's no licenses involved with it, but you need a little bit of design skill to create the screen. And basically what you can do, you can brand your screens and you can really simplify web GUI. And we're not just saying use this for Maextro, we're saying use this within your organization. It's a no-brainer. If you've got SAP Fiori already, brilliant. Remember, SAP Fiori is just a design standard. We follow those design standards to create screens using this user interface, which is screen personas and the new Slipstream engine. So we'll come back to this one. Obviously, Fiori, we've got Fiori apps, which we might have time to touch on as well. So based on that, I'm going to hand over to Feroz. We're just going to show a simple process. This is just an example where a user will go in and create a request for a new object, and then it might be an approval step and a simple update the material master. That's a real simple process. It could look like that. For example, customer master, you might have different people involved in that process. The important thing with Maextro as well, as you can see here, you can because it's process based, we can reach out and do links into credit management, all sorts of things. All depends on your business process. So I'm just going to refresh my screen and just show you the UIs. So hopefully you can see my screen. This is Web GUI, and I'm just going to show you the Maextro transaction. So Maextro sits within your core ERP. You don't need any infrastructure. You don't need any people to help you with networks or anything like that. It's just transports that get shipped, sits within your environment, and it sits in its own namespace, which basically means it's not going to affect anything else going on in standard SAP. So this is a SAP Screen Personas screen, and this is what Maextro would look like. And we're going to come back to this because Carl's going to give a demo of some of the new screens and some of the new analytics, and I'll let Feroz talk through the example. So this is Screen Personas, and as I said earlier, what we have as well is SAP Fiori apps, which look and function pretty much the same. Okay, that's enough of my rabble. So I'm just showing a Fiori app here, just to show you what it looks like. Yeah, real simple, intuitive screens. But let's just go into making Feroz a presenter and just take you through a general overview of the product, and then quickly we want to dive into business rules after that. Yeah. Over to you, Feroz.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
I think we have Feroz as the presenter, but not his slides yet. That's it.
Yeah.
You can speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. So hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
So that's a standard Maextro in standard SAP GUI screen, how it looks like. So just to give you a background on what so this is a standard Maextro menu options. From here, I'm going to go into system settings, and then I'm just going to set up some rules. Basically, these rules are telling me, what sort of data quality should be there when I'm running the claims report. So I go into my rules, I select the object I need the rule against, and then this is the rule which is called, we call it as data conformity rule. Now this data conformity will tell me whether my data conforms to certain conditions as I define in there. Now you can see there are different rules I've set up in here, which is called as the basic data checks. Now these are purely configuration. You can define these rules as you wish. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but just to give you the background. So for example, I've got this CL0 through rule in there, which is telling me that's a minimum quantity required for the plant. So if I go and define the rule, so you can see that it's a simple configuration options where you say, if the plant is equal to 1,000, then my minimum delivery quantity should always be greater than 10. So you can say that these are simple rules which you can define before you run your cleanse report. So likewise, you could go in and add any number of rules, and then depending upon whether they are a warning or an error message, you can set the flags accordingly. Now, once you've defined the rules, then you are good to start on your cleanse option. So as Dan was explaining earlier, everything starts with a request. So this is where Maestro brings in governance. So as Dan said, we focus heavily on governance. This is not someone just logging into MM17 like SAP's transaction and making direct updates. This is I'm going in and creating a request first, and then reviewing the data before the actual updates happen. So just for the demo purposes, I'm just going to create one request. So it's called as data cleanse, the request type. And then depending upon the object you're cleansing, you select the object, and then you put in the description, the reason why you're doing the data, and then template. So again, you could have different templates. What the templates do is they govern the process. So in this case, you can see that I'm first creating the request, and I'm going to check the data, and then somebody is going to come and approve the data rather than me doing the updates and the checks at the same time. Now, in the selection screens, basically in this selection screen, you're specifying your search parameters as to what materials you need to select. So I'm going to just select a small subset of data because you can imagine it's going to be very heavy when I run across the different plants and storage locations. So I'm going to just limit it to one plant, one storage location, one sales org, sorry. Now, these selection parameters you can configure as you like, depending upon your organization. You might want to bring in the evaluation class and storage types and things like that. It's purely configuration. So what I'm doing here, just to put in context, is I'm saying, go and look for all these plants and all these materials and bring in all those materials that does not conform to the rules which we have seen earlier. So what the report is going to do now is going to, when I say save, it's going to go in and create the request. So what the report has done now is created the request, but at the same time, it has given me, the material that has not conformed to those certain rules. So if I go back onto my task list, you can see there are 2 open tasks against my name. Now, usually I'm an administrator here, that's why I see both the tasks. But usually, if you have a hierarchical approval, I would only see a task as a review data, and then the approver would sit with somebody else in the organization. He's the one who's going to really press the button, and at that time, the updates actually happen in backend ERP. So I'm going to click quickly on the review data. So this is the report that comes out then, which is telling me that these are all the materials that does not conform to these rules. So you can see clearly the rule IDs against them. So on the first top 3, it has broken my rule of minimum sales of the next ones does not conform to the MRP checks, and then so some of them are hard errors and some of them are warnings. So I'll explain you now. When I click on this button, then I can actually see that it's telling me what rule it has broken, and then it's telling me that I need to then update the quantity here. So I'm going to quickly update the quantity as 11 because it needs to be greater, so it goes green. Then I go back and then similarly change all the quantities. Okay. Now you can see that the next set of materials that is broken the rule is the MRP checks. Now this is an interesting one here. The indicator is telling me that the auto correction is possible, which means the rule can be applied automatically via Maextro. So what I could do then is I could say select all auto corrections, okay, and then simply press the button to correct it. So if you go and look at the data now, the data is my MRP type is MO, whereas my rule is saying it needs to be PD. Now, when I go in and say autocorrect, then the data should be all autocorrected. It all goes green. And if you go back and check it, and then it should be PD. So there's simple things like that. You can set it up. Now, once I'm done with it, I'm not going to bother and correct the warnings because I know they are there and somebody needs to take some corrective actions. But I'm not going to correct the data at this stage. All I'm going to do is say I'm done with this, and then I'm going to close the task. Give me a warning that I've not processed all. I'm fine with that. Then I go back onto the review task. So you can see that the review data is now ready for me to check the data and approve it. I go into the approve. And as an approver now, up until this point, nothing has happened. All the data is still sitting in Maextro internal tables. You haven't really updated SAP yet, because obviously you want someone to review the data and check it. So as a reviewer, then I could go into the change log and clearly see what changes have been done. So you can see that now I might not accept these changes and then reject the data, send it back to the reviewer, or send it back to another hierarchical reviewer process and things like that. If I'm happy, all I'm going to do is just say approve data, and then at this point the BAPI should kick in, and then it should update the material master in this case. So simple things like that. As I said, I was only showing you with a small subset of data, but it can be expanded to a much larger set of data. So at this point, I'll just hand over the control to Dan, who'll take you through some other business rules and things like that. Yeah, over to you.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I was on mute then as well. Can you hear me okay, yeah?
Right, sorry, who have we got speaking at the moment?
Yes, Dan.
Dan, yeah.
Okay. Right, okay, so thanks for that, Faraz. We'll come back and we'll show a little bit more of what Faraz was just showing there. So, yeah, as per the Maextro config, as you could see there, we've got this concept called template, which basically holds rules and processes. So you could see from Faraz's demonstration there, it defines some business logic, some business rules really easily, no code required. And he also defined a process. So for that particular data cleanse process, it had an approval stage within the process defined. So the templates, it's kind of bringing together rules, processes, workflow, all that kind of good stuff. Sounds really simple. Believe me, it's not. But from a user point of view and from an implementation point of view, it's fairly straightforward. And it's an incredibly powerful thing. So if you can think about some of the business rules that you might want, you might want to check your business rules on the defaults that you would like to have versus the values that are sitting in SAP, and you can run that cleanse function. So there are a lot of things that you can check quite easily, duplicate checks and all that type of stuff. But these are the rules that we typically ship with Maextro. So there's lots and lots of rules. We even ship capability around user exits, so you can pretty much write your own rules. But we've not really come across many customers at all that have needed to go down that road. The functionality as standard configuration is available within Maextro. You can do an awful lot of stuff there. So yeah, this is what Faraz was kind of showing you. So creating a business rule, I think it was a real simple one. So if plant is equal to 1,000, then minimum delivery quantity is greater than 10. So it's really straightforward. If you look at, as I say, I don't want to keep kicking SAP, but some of the products that are there around MDG, they are quite complex, and that sometimes is great, but for the majority of organizations, they don't need that complexity within their kind of infrastructure or kind of processes within the business. So this is kind of where we're going with Cleanse. We're hoping it will be released for general sale very soon, but you kind of understand the concept. Somebody will put in a request to do a cleanse. You run the data, update the data, and then it'll go off for approval. Now you don't have to have that approval, but again, this whole governance and best practice kicks in. So this cleanse process that we're talking about, we would kind of call it either data scrubbing. It's different to your kind of legacy data migration. That is handled in a different way with Maextro. This is all about, you know, periodically running cleanse. But from our point of view, if you're running all your material, all your objects through Maextro, you should never really need to run a cleanse application because all those rules are being applied at runtime. So, I mean, a typical example might be there's been a change in the organization, a change in configuration with SAP. You have to do some updates to, you know, whatever object, material master. And so at that point, yeah, you would run a query and a cleanse across the data with that approval stage, rather than a lot of people today will either run a mass transaction in SAP or they'll run an SMW or something like that. This puts a bunch of governance around it, and it does make it a lot easier. Like I said, sometimes you need specialist skill to do that, whereas here it's not so much. So yeah, we quickly shown the demo. What I'd like to do in a second is show some of the UI5 new functionality that we're bringing. Could you create a task for Kyle, and then I will hand it over. Okay, going to assign Kyle, and then I'm going to go back on mute. So Helen, again, hopefully you can see Kyle's screen, and hopefully you can hear me because Kyle's right next to me and he's navigating.
Right, so we've got Kyle's screen, and is Kyle speaking through you or himself?
Sorry, say that again, Helen. I missed you.
Right, what I'll do is if I mute Kyle.
Yeah, fine.
Right, so what,
and you can use the audio through this one. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, let's just explain. So what you're seeing here, it's not a business warehouse. It's not a business object screen. This is SAP screen personas. As I said, it's free of charge. You need to activate it. You need a little bit of skill on how to do it, but it's not kind of programming type skill. So what Kyle's showing here is the cleanse dashboard. And what we've done, we can produce some really nice kind of analytics here. So just to show, you know, for the cleanse report that he's just run, he's got 9 errors, 3 warnings, and there's 6 that could be auto-corrected via the program utility here. So what we're doing is just showing you the kind of the nice stuff that you can do with the UI. Yeah, this is just screen personas sitting over the top of SAP GUI. No additional infrastructure, no licenses. You can get out some really nice kind of reports. Can we show the normal analytics for the open requests and things like that, please, Kyle? So as we were talking about, what we're focusing on today is cleanse, okay? But as I was explaining earlier, Maextro is all about running your kind of BAU. So somebody wanting new customers, new vendors, changing to vendors, changing customers, all that sort of stuff. So again, we've got some nice reports here where you can kind of just do some analytics around the data. So again, it's quite a simple example here, but you can see the number of open tasks per object. So here I can see I've got 4 open requests for an object. So you've got different options again with this new UI technology. So if you could show just the basic screen, Kyle, just to show people the difference of this is my kind of ALV data versus versus the analytics. So that is what it would look like in GUI in Maextro. So there's a report there that can give you all the information that you kind of need. And what we're doing, we're putting a kind of little dashboard on the top, which we ship with our product for those of you that are running screen personas. Obviously, you have to pay for the kind of design service, but you're talking a day or two to get all the analytics up and running and to make it all really nice and visual. So you're taking one ALV report, which is like a table report, and what Kyle's done, he's kind of just made it visual. So if you can imagine you're running Maextro across a number of different objects, across different organizational entries, you can pull up some really nice kind of analytics using this product. Lastly, could we just show the slipstream and a slipstream example? So what we're showing you at the moment, guys, is SAP screen personas. This screen here is what's called the slipstream engine. So just to explain what slipstream is, it's taking screen personas, which if you think about it is kind of web GUI, and what we're doing, we're rendering all those controls in HTML5. And what Kyle and our design teams do, we create what's called responsive flavors. So it makes those screens responsive for desktop, tablet, and mobile. I'll let Kyle explain some of the features of Slipstream around the header and the footer, just to explain things, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so the header, much like in SAP Fiori, you notice that it has a fixed header and a fixed footer, and the footer in Fiori always has the most important buttons or functions that apply to a screen. In normal screen personas, you wouldn't have that because it doesn't have the functionality to generate a fixed header or a fixed footer. But Slipstream, luckily, because it can be integrated with the Fiori launchpad, it can be placed as an actual tile on the launchpad. It automatically generates a fixed header and a fixed footer, and automatically puts the buttons that are most important for that screen onto the footer. So you can see here, this is an example. This is the Maextro create request screen. If I go back to where it looks like in basic view, you can see this is basic view in Slipstream. If I went to basic view in personas,
so you see what we're doing, it sounds simple, but we're taking the standard transactions and we're simplifying them with this UI technology.
Yeah.
And that's what we ship our product in.
So you can see here, basic view of what create request looks like. The most important button, save, is up on the header. A lot of users might miss that if they aren't used to navigating normal GUI, but in Fiori standards, the most important buttons will sit on a fixed footer at the bottom of the screen. And you can see our flavor in Slipstream, it's automatically generated a fixed footer. And this will do it across all devices. So if I was to run this on mobile, the footer and header will still be fixed. The controls will be shrink to fit the screen, and it just sticks to Fiori guidelines where you can't not add any horizontal scroll bars.
Good stuff. Can you assign the screen back to me? I'm conscious that we need to take a few questions. I've got one there already. Okay, so yeah, that's just to explain the UI5 Slipstream engine. And audio. So I'm hoping you can hear me okay again, Helen, yeah?
Yes, that's fine. I can hear you fine.
If you could just confirm you can hear me okay.
Sorry, yes, I can hear you fine, Dan. I can hear you fine. Hopefully you can.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so just moving on quickly, let's just answer one of the questions here. So there's one from Jason around fuzzy logic for duplicates. Okay, so yes, we do have logic for certainly material descriptions in SAP. At the moment, I would say, if I'm being brutally honest with you, we've got quite a big development to do on the fuzzy logic, but we absolutely do what you're saying there. So if somebody requests a new material within Maextro, They'll put in a description. At that point, we can invoke a search and a duplicate check. The great thing about Maextro is that the person approving the request can see those search criteria that the requester made, and he can kind of challenge it immediately. So, I mean, on our website, we've got a few webinars on there which kind of give some detail, but we've got in our development roadmap, which you'll see in a minute, quite a lot of work around fuzzy logic. There was another question there from Ben around how it could be applied to finance master data. Well, funny enough, GL accounts, we're actually running a project right now around GL. We've got a number of processes in place with GL where you can create one GL across multiple company codes. It's got its own approval steps and things like that in there. So I'm hoping I'm answering your question. Can the rules in Maextro relate to transactional data? Identify any GL codes that have been nil? Okay, so there's two things here. I mean, yes, absolutely. The cleanse application would highlight some of that, but I'll give you other examples where what we've got in the pipeline. So where we've got vendor and customers that haven't had any transactions posted against them. Same with your kind of GL. Yeah, you can run those analytics and then kind of run a cleanse program. So materials that haven't moved, slow moving items and things like that, you could block them. So yeah, it's all in there in terms of the functionality of the product. As I said to you, around enhancements, what we're working on right now, simple things like, let's take the vendor request. So what typically happens, the vendor will fill in a form, it'll go to somebody to tap that in to SAP, whereas what we're kind of saying is, to challenge that process, you could potentially give them something like this. Okay, so it's a form, and this is based on OpenUI5, so there's nothing to do with SAP. So it's a web form, vendor would fill in their information, they would press the submit, it would land in the Maextro request approval, and then it would go through whatever approval processes you've got where you might need to gather more data and things like that. But it's just a different way of working. So we offer OpenUI5 as almost a self-service form as well. So that's another new enhancement that we've got. As I said, the analytics is where we're spending quite a lot of effort. So, change logs of what's been changed when by who. Workflows, as I said, you really want to monitor your planned date of creation or change versus your actual. Yeah, so there's some really powerful reports that you can look at there. And as I said, the planned delivery of reporting within Cleanse itself is quite a big one. So we want to look at these rule violations, as you say, on the questions there. Can it be integrated with SuccessFactors? Well, we've never been asked, but we integrate with other systems like Salesforce. So if you think of Salesforce, is where probably the customer account and that negotiation and that pipeline starts. We'll use an API and bring that information into a request within Maextro so that it just stops all the duplication of data. So everything's kept aligned. So Salesforce might have an ID, it'll come into Maextro, it will capture that information, and then at the end we'll send information back to Salesforce. So I don't see why we couldn't do exactly the same with SuccessFactors. All we need to do is just review the APIs that we use. So from a technical point of view, we can hook in to all different types of systems. As I said, this is the UI5 form that we're doing. So this is a really nice way of kind of opening up collaboration of data. And when it comes into Maextro, it gets sense checked across those business rules. So this was our roadmap last year. It's been pretty hectic, to be honest. We've done quite a lot of work around mass processing. To be honest, the finance object area is the one that surprised us the most, because we always thought GL processing would be pretty straightforward, but it turns out that a lot of businesses that have a lot of company codes do a lot of mass processing around GL. So we've absolutely covered a lot of that functionality. We've improved a lot on our, we've got a lot more kind of Fury functionality now, and as well as the new UI5 engine from Slipstream, we've got another interface to offer people. This year is a crazy year again for us, so we're getting ready to launch the Cleanse add-on. And we've already started on the next step, as I said, in the data strategy, which is to archive. So we want to start that piece of work as well. As I said, I can't remember which guy it was. I think it was Jason around the fuzzy logic. We've got more to do on that. We're delivering fuzzy logic as it is. What was the final pieces? Yeah. So as we spoke about, this is quite an interesting topic in itself, but Maextro sits within your core ERP, which means you don't need infrastructure, don't need licenses, to buy from SAP. You're already buying licenses from SAP, so we kind of utilize it. What we're actually looking at is for individual companies that have, let's say, 50 SAP instances, then using Maextro as a kind of hub. It's not how it was originally designed, but we think based on the intellectual property that we've got, we can actually get there, and we can get there relatively quick. And yeah, we're looking at all the other fancy stuff. So I think, the buzzwords at the moment is cloud, IoT, so Internet of Things, and voice enablement and things like that. It's all kind of on our pipeline. Our challenge right now is being able to turn these innovations around quickly, and that's kind of where we're at the moment. So I won't go through archiving on how it's going to work, but we'll send this out in the pack so you get an idea of what it's going to do within Maextro. And yeah, the innovation areas, as I said, it's pretty open-ended, to be honest. But we are within our company, because of our user experience practice, we have these designers and methodology that we follow. It's almost agile, but it's design thinking. So if it's technically feasible, we think it certainly needs reviewing and bouncing around. So to highlight what we've kind of showed you, we've very quickly gone through Cleanse, but if you can imagine Maextro as being that kind of solution that manages your BAU, your data within SAP, it's got its own workflow, incredibly flexible. We ship it with best-in-class templates, so you don't have to start from the beginning. A lot of organizations, when we visit them and say, right, what do you want? A lot of the time they don't know. So, around business processes and business rules and things like that. So we can ship that as part of standard. Yeah, we think it's great. We've had some really good feedback on the product as well. I won't give you the marketing spin of why us. I'll leave that for another day. You guys hopefully will make up your own mind. From my point of view, I think that was it. In terms of the demonstration, I'm just reading another one here. Jason is asking, one of the previous diagrams say you need SDS. No, you don't. You don't need SDS for Maextro. What that diagram is referring to is what SAP deliver as standard. Yeah, you don't need any of those SAP products. If you're running SAP ERP, you can run Maextro. And you can run Maextro across all those different areas that I said. The analytics, the cleanse, the BAU, running of data, approving of data. You don't need any additional services from SAP, like SAP Data Services. You don't need it. If you've got it, that's fine. You can utilize it. We're not saying don't use those things. But if you haven't implemented them, you don't need them. All you need is either ECC6 or S/4HANA. I think those were the questions, unless we have any more, Helen, that I can't see.
Yep, there's a couple here. How easy is it to write business rules in Maextro?
Well, hopefully you guys would have seen what Farrell's did. If I go back to here, it's pretty simple. You've got lots of different rule types within Maextro, and you basically define the rule ID and what sort of, whether it's an error or a warning, and then you would define it, which is this bit. And it's really simple. It's really simple. You'll specify the view or the screen that people are using, the field description, and what you want to happen. So it's pretty easy to answer the question.
Okay. Thank you for that. Another one, should you not firstly start with a cleanse of the data before implementing Maextro?
Yeah, good question. Some people do, but our stance has always been you would never need to do cleanse if you were running Maextro in the first place. So we say establish your business rules and your business processes in Maextro first and start churning data through that way, and then you run a cleanse. It's far more efficient, because what we found just through research, listening to horror stories, people will spend 12, 18 months trying to cleanse the data and they're still not implemented any best-in-class processes. So we feel this way, you get a lot further and a lot quicker to where your goal is.
Okay. Just a couple more. Will Maextro clean non-SAP data?
Good question, Matt. Potentially, because within Maextro we can hold Z fields, and I think we've got the capacity to hold lots of data within Maextro because it sits in namespace tables. So providing you have a rule and you've configured that rule in Maextro, you could bring that data in and you could send it back out, but it wouldn't reside in an SAP table as such. That's an interesting question. Any others, Helen, or is that it?
Right. Sorry, there's one there. What's the biggest lesson learned so far on your implementations?
There'd be a few, I think. I'd say the top one's probably getting the stakeholder vision and getting the education of why data is important. That would be probably my number one. Number two would be understanding what you want in terms of your business rules and your business process. So a lot of the time we're turning up to start a project, they understand what Maextro can do, but don't really do a lot of homework around what process they actually want, what business rules they want to apply. Sometimes they do, don't get me wrong, and those projects are easier because it should be a fairly straightforward event. But education, I'd say, is number one. And number two is knowing what rules you want to apply to your data and knowing what process you want to follow. You know, do I want to approve it and who do I want to approve it by? So all that kind of stuff can happen irrespective of the technology you're using. And I think it's a good bit of homework that people could perhaps do.
Okay, two final questions. What analytics does Maextro have, or can I use my business information solution?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, you can absolutely. It sits in SAP, so you could build a BI or a BW cube to extract that data and churn it. But as we showed you and what Kyle was showing, we can pretty much do some really nice analytics in a HTML kind of HTML5 format using screen personas. So for us, that's the way we would go. But if you want to use your existing BI solutions, then that's fine.
Okay, one final question that's just come through on chat. HR master data cleansing, i.e. addresses, uppercase, upper, lowercase, etc. Yeah, again, we've not done any on HR actually, because everybody kind of uses other services for HR. But yeah, it's the same logic. So if it's SAP data and you want to clean the data and have those rules in place, so we call it a format mask. So, you know, beginning of address is uppercase and, you know, so many characters. That can absolutely be done with Maextro. Okay, that looks like to be all of the questions that we've had through. There's nothing else there, so Dan, if you would just like to close, unless you have anything else to add. No, I don't. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Faraz, and thank you, Helen. And if anybody's got any questions, I think what happens, Helen, you zip up the recording and the slides and send on to the users. But if anybody's got any further questions, please contact me directly or go to the Maextro website where there's some videos and some content on there. But reach out to us. We're here to help. So yeah, thanks everybody. Okay, thank you very much everybody, and thanks for joining us. Thank you. Bye. Thanks.